When my wife clinked her wine glass and announced she was leaving me for her wealthy boss, I didn't react. When she drained our joint account and mocked my pathetic little life, I let her gloat. When she called me a failure, laughing in my face, I simply nodded. She thought she had won. What she didn't realize was that I had already set everything in motion. And by the time she figured it out, there would be nothing left for her to salvage. I had always believed that hard work and loyalty were enough to build a good life. I never needed to be the richest man in the room, never cared for fancy suits or expensive watches. I worked hard, paid the bills, saved for the future, and did my best to make my wife happy. But for Sophia, that wasn't enough. She used to look at me with admiration. Back when we were just starting out, she loved how steady I was, how I always had a plan. But over time, that admiration faded into boredom, then into thinly veiled contempt. She started rolling her eyes when I talked about budgeting. She complained that I lacked ambition, that I was too comfortable with our simple life. Then came the new clothes, the designer perfume, the late nights at the office. Always with an excuse. Always with that smirk, as if she thought I was too stupid to notice what was happening. I knew. I had known for weeks. The confirmation came at dinner. A family gathering at her sister's house, meant to be a casual evening, turned into something else entirely. Sophia leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine, and with a satisfied smirk, she said it. "I'm leaving Ethan," she announced, letting the words sit in the air for maximum effect. "Liam and I are moving in together." The table went quiet for a second. Then Ryan, her brother-in-law, let out a low chuckle, glancing at my car parked outside. "Yeah, that makes sense," he muttered, shaking his head. I didn't react. I just watched as Sophia, emboldened by the attention, decided to make it worse. "I mean, come on," she continued, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "I deserve better. I can't keep carrying a man who's content with being average." She let out a dramatic sigh, like she had been burdened by me for years. "Do you even know what Liam makes in a month? More than Ethan does in a year." Her sister shifted uncomfortably, but Ryan was enjoying himself. Sophia, basking in the moment, pulled something from her purse, my wallet. She tossed it onto the table like it was a piece of trash. "You might need this, now that you're on your own." She smirked. "Oh, and don't worry about our joint account. I made sure to leave you enough for instant noodles." Laughter rippled through the room. I felt their eyes on me, waiting for me to snap, to get angry, to beg. I did none of those things. I simply picked up my wallet, slid it into my pocket, and stood up. I didn't look at her, didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the sound of her victorious laughter. She thought she had won. What she didn't know was that I had already started playing the long game. And by the time she realized it, there would be nothing left for her to hold on to. As I stepped out into the cold night air, leaving behind the murmurs and laughter echoing from the dinner table, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet certainty. She thought I was humiliated. She thought I was crushed. But in reality, I was calm. Because this wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. The drive home was silent. Just the hum of the engine and the distant echoes of Sophia's voice playing in my mind. I had seen it coming. The late nights at work, the sudden obsession with high-end brands, the way she stopped looking at me like I was her husband and started looking at me like I was an inconvenience. Sophia wasn't leaving because she had fallen out of love. She was leaving because she thought she had found something better. Liam, her boss, the one she had been staying late with, laughing a little too easily at his jokes, dressing a little too well for meetings. A man who made more in a month than I made in a year. A man who promised her the world. Diamonds, luxury. A life she believed she deserved. And she thought she had won. When I pulled into our driveway, something immediately felt off. The gravel had been disturbed. Tire tracks I didn't recognize carving patterns into the dirt. Someone had been here. Inside, the lights were still on. Through the window, I saw Sophia in our bedroom. Not packing for a trip, not grabbing a suitcase, but carefully wrapping gifts. My gifts. Every expensive present I had ever given her over the past 5 years. The Tag Heuer watch I had worked overtime to buy last Christmas. The diamond earrings from our anniversary, still in their original box. She was humming, smiling as she cushioned them with bubble wrap, handling them with the care of someone boxing up expensive merchandise. She didn't even notice me standing there. I pushed open the door, keeping my voice level. Going somewhere? She flinched, nearly dropping the jewelry box, but just as quickly recovered. She turned, crossing her arms over her chest, that smug little smirk back on her lips. Oh good. Saves me the trouble of texting you. She tilted her head toward the half-packed bags. I'm leaving. Liam and I are moving in together. I nodded. No surprise there. She must have expected me to fight back, to argue, to plead. But when I didn't react, she kept going, her voice taking on that condescending tone she had perfected over the last few months. You know, you should be grateful, she said, gesturing vaguely around the room. I stuck around longer than I should have. You got 5 years with me, and look at you. Still in this little house, still driving that same boring car. She scoffed. Meanwhile, I've wasted the best years of my life waiting for you to be something more. I just watched her. She took my silence as weakness, a mistake. Liam says it's cute, she continued, picking up the watch, examining it under the light. That you thought this was luxury. She laughed. He wears one's worth 10 times this. But don't worry. I'm taking everything I deserve. She had no idea. I stayed quiet, let her talk, let her dig herself deeper. And then, as casually as I could, I said, and the joint account? Her smirk widened. Oh, don't worry, she said sweetly. I left you enough for instant noodles. She let out a sharp laugh, high and cruel, like she had just delivered the punchline to the best joke of her life. And that's when I smiled. Not the kind of smile she expected. Not the smile of a man defeated, but the smile of a man who had already won. She frowned. What? Nothing, I said, stepping aside. Don't let me keep you. Liam's waiting, right? She hesitated, as if something in my tone unsettled her, but then rolled her eyes and grabbed her bags. She stormed past me, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Liam's, no doubt. As she stepped outside, struggling to carry her overstuffed luggage, I glanced toward the neighbor's yard. Mrs. Lancaster, the old widow from next door, was tending to her garden, pretending not to watch. But when I caught her eye, she gave me the smallest nod. Good witnesses could be useful. Sophia yanked open the car door. Liam didn't get out to help. Interesting. I stood in the doorway, watching as they drove off, listening to the gravel crunch under their tires. And the moment they disappeared down the road, I pulled out my phone, unlocked my password-protected folder, and scrolled through months of carefully documented evidence. Every financial statement, every deleted message I had recovered, every sudden shift in behavior, every breadcrumb that led to this moment. I took a deep breath, letting the satisfaction settle in. Sophia thought she had played me, but what she didn't realize was that I had been keeping receipts long before she even decided to make her first move. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for what happens next. Before I share the rest, I want to hear from you. Have you ever watched someone walk straight into their own downfall, completely unaware? Drop your stories in the comments. And if you've ever believed in the power of karma, hit that like button, because trust me, this one is going to be satisfying. The house was quiet after she left, but I wasn't alone. The weight of everything she had said still lingered in the air, but instead of anger, I felt something else, certainty. This was going to play out exactly as I had expected. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, scrolling through the files I had been collecting for months. Every financial statement, every suspicious transaction, every deleted message I had recovered. I had never been the kind of man to react impulsively. I was patient, methodical, and I had learned a long time ago that the best revenge wasn't loud or messy. It was quiet, precise, and it had already begun. The first cracks started to show within days. At first, I ignored the calls, let them pile up in my voicemail. The first few were smug, Sophia's voice dripping with condescension, gloating about how much better her new life was. But by the fourth day, her tone had changed. The confidence had slipped, replaced with something else. Panic. She wasn't calling to taunt me anymore. She was calling because something was wrong. And I already knew what. Sophia had always been reckless with money. She loved luxury, but she had never cared about the price tag. For years, I had covered her overspending, picking up extra work to make sure we never fell behind. But Liam? He wasn't a man who played the long game. He had given her a taste of wealth. Fancy dinners, designer clothes, expensive vacations, but he had never promised her security. And now it was all catching up to her. I finally answered on the 13th call. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You did something." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Ethan," she snapped, her voice sharp with frustration. "The bank called me. They're saying I have to pay back the money from our joint account. That's not how this works. I had every right to take my share." I almost laughed. She still didn't get it. "You didn't take your share, Sophia," I said calmly. "You took everything, without my consent. And banks don't like that." There was a beat of silence, then a sharp inhale. "You set me up." "No," I corrected. "You set yourself up. I just documented it." She cursed under her breath, but before she could launch into another tirade, I cut her off. "You should really be focusing on Liam right now. He's got bigger problems." That got her attention. "What do you mean?" I debated whether to tell her, but in the end, I decided she'd find out soon enough. "Let's just say your new life might not be as secure as you think. You might want to check his accounts." I hung up before she could respond. That was the beauty of it. She had walked straight into her own downfall, and I hadn't needed to lift a finger. Liam had been reckless, too. He had spent months impressing her, showering her with gifts, letting her believe she had upgraded to something better. But Sophia had never questioned where the money was coming from. She had never considered that Liam was playing his own game. Because while I had spent years planning for the future, Liam had been living on credit. And credit always runs out. The next week, I heard through the grapevine that things were unraveling quickly. Liam had been called into a financial review at his company, something about discrepancies in expense reports. I knew exactly what that meant. The same friend who had tipped me off about his habits had confirmed it. Liam had been using company funds for personal expenses, lavish dinners, luxury gifts, first-class vacations. It had all seemed like nothing at the time, small enough to fly under the radar. Until now, the merger had changed everything. The company was under new management, and they were reviewing all financial activity. Every dollar had to be accounted for. Every questionable transaction needed an explanation. And Liam didn't have one. I imagined the moment he realized it. The slow dawning horror as he understood that the lifestyle he had promised Sophia wasn't built on wealth. It was built on a house of cards, and the whole thing was about to collapse. The best part? I didn't even have to do anything. I just waited. And sure enough, the call came 2 weeks later. This time, Sophia's voice was raw, stripped of all the arrogance she once carried. "I need your help." I let that sit for a moment, savoring the shift. "Help with what?" "It's Liam," she admitted, her voice cracking. He's not who I thought he was. Everything is a mess. The credit cards are maxed out. The bank is calling, and..." She stopped, inhaling sharply. I shouldn't have left. It was almost too easy. I could have told her the truth then, that I had known all along, that I had watched her dig herself deeper and deeper, knowing exactly where it would lead, that she had burned every bridge and was now standing in the wreckage of her own choices. But instead I just smiled. "That's too bad, Sophia," I said, keeping my voice light. "I'm really enjoying my new life." And then, for the first time in our entire relationship, I hung up on her. Liam was unraveling. I had seen it coming, of course. It was only a matter of time before his carefully constructed image fell apart. At first, Sophia probably didn't notice the signs. She was too busy flaunting her new life, posting pictures of expensive dinners, tagging locations at luxury hotels. But money moves quietly when it's real, and loudly when it's running out. It started with something small. A declined card at a restaurant. An awkward pause when the waiter handed the bill to Liam instead of her. She probably brushed it off, assuming it was a mistake. But then the red flags started piling up. He was on edge, distracted. His phone calls became more frequent, his tone more agitated. Then, one night, she finally saw the truth. She overheard Liam on the phone, pacing around their overpriced apartment, his voice strained. "What do you mean they're cutting me out?" His breathing was sharp, unsteady. "No, listen, I can fix this. It was just some minor, no. Don't do this. I built that portfolio. I made those deals happen. You wouldn't have landed the merger without me." Silence. Then something was said on the other end, and Liam's entire demeanor changed. He hurled his phone across the room, barely missing her. She must have realized then, in that very moment, that she had made a mistake. Liam wasn't the wealthy, untouchable man she thought he was. He was just another fraud who had climbed too high too fast. And now he was falling. The next day he was fired. Not quietly either. The company had to make an example of him to show that financial misconduct wouldn't be tolerated. The moment the investigation began, they started digging. And what they found? A mess. Unauthorized expenses. Misallocated funds. Lavish business dinners that weren't business at all. None of it was outright illegal, but it was enough to ruin his career. And just like that, the man Sophia had risked everything for became worthless. She had traded stability for a mirage. I imagine it must have hit her like a freight train when she saw the eviction notice. When the bank started calling about the overdue payments. When Liam, the man who had once promised her the world, turned to her with blame in his eyes. "This is your fault," he spat. "You bled me dry. You spent like money was endless. And now look at us." She must have laughed at the absurdity of it. "Are you kidding me? You lied about your entire life. You made me think we had everything." Liam scoffed. "And you believed it. That was it." That was the moment she knew. She had burned every bridge, walked away from the only person who ever truly had her back, and now she was standing in the ruins of the empire she thought she had built. Her family wanted nothing to do with her. Megan, her sister, had found out the truth about the money, about the lies she had told them about me. And once Megan turned her back, the rest of the family followed. Sophia was officially alone. And so, in the only act of desperation she had left, she came back to me. It was raining when she showed up at my doorstep. She didn't have the confident smirk anymore. No designer bags, no expensive jewelry. Just soaked hair, smudged makeup, and a thin coat that did nothing against the cold. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside. She let out a slow breath as if trying to collect herself. "Ethan." I didn't say anything. She swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." Silence. "I see that now," she continued, wrapping her arms around herself. "I was wrong about you, about everything. Liam, he wasn't who I thought he was. I should never have left. I should never have." Her voice cracked. "I miss you." For a moment, I let the words hang there. I watched her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw it: regret. Real, genuine regret. But it wasn't because she missed me. It was because she missed the life I had built for her. The security. The comfort. I took a slow step back. And that's when she saw her. Standing behind me, leaning casually against the doorway, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, was Rain. Sophia's breath hitched. "You've got to be kidding me." Rain smirked. "Hey, Sophia. Long time no see." Sophia turned back to me, her face twisting. "Her? You're with her." I finally spoke. "Since you showed me exactly who you were." For the first time, she had no response. She just stood there, staring between us, searching for something, some way to regain control. Some way to fix what was already beyond repair. But there was nothing left to salvage. I didn't slam the door in her face. I didn't need to. I just closed it. I didn't think about Sophia much after that night. Maybe that's what surprised me the most. For months, she had consumed my thoughts, her betrayal, her arrogance, her certainty that she had won. But the moment I closed that door, it was like she no longer existed in my world. Rain glanced at me after it was over, her arms crossed as she listened to the sound of Sophia's footsteps fading into the rain. "She actually thought you'd take her back," she muttered, shaking her head. I shrugged. Some people never learn. And that was that. Sophia tried to reach out a few more times, but I never answered. She sent texts that started as apologies, then turned into accusations, then finally into desperate pleas. When those didn't work, she moved on to posting vague, cryptic messages online, the kind of dramatic, attention-seeking nonsense people write when they want someone to chase after them. I never did. The last time I heard about her was from Megan. She called me one afternoon, her voice unreadable over the phone. She's moving back in with Mom and Dad, she said. She has nowhere else to go. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the way she had laughed at me that night. The way she had tossed my wallet onto the table like I was beneath her. The way she had wiped out our savings and told me I'd be lucky to afford ramen. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. Liam, of course, had disappeared. He left the city the moment his career went up in flames, and from what I heard, he was struggling to find work. Apparently, corporate executives don't like hiring men with a reputation for financial misconduct. Who would have guessed? As for me, I moved forward. I had spent so much time planning my revenge that I almost forgot what life looked like outside of it. But once the dust settled, I realized how much I had gained. I was free. Free from a toxic marriage. Free from someone who had never truly valued me. Free to start over. And this time I was doing it on my terms. I got a promotion at work not because I was trying to prove anything, but because I had finally started investing in myself again. I found a new place, one that felt like home, not just a house I had shared with someone who never appreciated it. And, of course, there was Rain. What started as an old friendship rekindled turned into something more, something real. She had seen me at my lowest and never pitied me. She had cheered me on quietly, never expecting anything in return. And somehow, through all of it, she became someone I wanted beside me, not as a replacement, not as revenge, but because she was simply the kind of person I should have been with all along. The last time I saw Sophia was months later. I was at a cafe downtown waiting for Rain to grab our coffee when I spotted her sitting alone at a corner table. She looked different, tired, smaller somehow. She must have seen me too, because for a second our eyes met. I didn't feel anything. No anger. No satisfaction. Just distance. She hesitated like she wanted to say something. Maybe she wanted to try one last time to rewrite our story, to pretend that things could have been different. But I wasn't interested. I gave her a small nod, nothing more, and turned away just as Rain returned, handing me my drink. "Something wrong?" she asked. I looked at her, at the warmth in her eyes, at the life I had built for myself without even realizing it. And I smiled. Not at all. And just like that, Sophia became nothing more than a chapter one had already finished. Life has a way of balancing the scales, and this story is proof of that. Sophia thought she could take shortcuts, that she could betray someone who truly cared for her and come out on top. But in the end, she lost everything, not because Ethan sought revenge, but because she had built her future on nothing but greed and lies. The lesson here is simple: never take people for granted, because the ones you underestimate today might be the ones who thrive without you tomorrow. Success is the best revenge, and sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and let karma do its job. Now, I want to hear from you. If you enjoyed this story, comment 2, and if it wasn't for you, comment 7. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in karma, and subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes for more stories that will make you think, feel, and maybe even change the way you see the world.